Now, upon the creation of this intro to types of demons, I thought that it would be more beneficial for you to see that there are the cluster B personality disorders specifically that we need to look at in regard to understanding the types of spirits and demons that we're dealing with. Now, these are terms that I have created on my own. This is not explicitly in the DSM-5, for example, although all of these cluster B personality disorders are in the DSM-5. And for those that are not familiar with the DSM-5, it is essentially a psychological uh, diagnosis manual. You can think about it like that. So when it comes to understanding demons and cluster B personality disorders, the first thing that we have to look at are, okay, well, what are the types of cluster B personality disorders? Well, the first one is going to be narcissism. Then there's going to be borderline personality disorder, histrionic, and then finally antisocial personality disorder. So the best way to think about this is for narcissism, there's the overt narcissist and the covert narcissist. So the overt narcissist is going to have this glorified vanity type of spirit, whereas the covert is going to be a subtly callous spirit. Okay, so the core traits of each of these are going to include things like grandiosity or the need for admiration or the lack of empathy. But the behavior is generally the same for both the covert and the overt. So they both seek constant attention. They overestimate their abilities, often in a negative way, and they aim to exploit others. Now, the reason for this is because they cannot stand to be not in the spotlight. They cannot stand to be quietly humble. Okay. Everybody that has a glorified vanity type of spirit or a subtly callous spirit, these are going to be demons. I see them as demons that are possessing the person. Whenever they have a personality disorder, they are actually inhabiting a demon. And I will say the same thing for certain types of disorders, not all disorders. Okay, I want to be clear about that because I've made the example in the past where this is not necessarily a personality disorder, but for example, there are the people who are, how do I say this appropriately? People with Down syndrome, for example, they're the happiest people I've ever met in my life. And for some reason, they don't seem to have a spirit to them. And if anything at all, they have a spirit of joy. Okay, they have the spirits of the Holy Spirit, or the fruits of the Holy Spirit, rather, more often than not. And it's not to say that they maybe can't possess these types of spirits that we're going to go into more in depth, but it's a possibility. So grandiosity is going to be a key factor, though, for any type of form of narcissism. And it's important to keep in mind that even with all four types of these cluster B personality disorders, they only make up about 5 to 10% of the population in total. So a lot of people will say, oh, they're narcissists, or this one's got BPD. It's like, okay, well, I think a lot of them do. I think the diagnosis and the percentages of the diagnostics are incorrect, genuinely and generally speaking. And so it's important to take this into effect, though, because we have to go off of data and literature and what the psychological literature is saying to some degree. Okay, peer-to-peer background and studies in the university is no longer reputable to me. However, we have to understand that this is part of the process. So now we have borderline personality disorder. More women have this than men. Oh, and one thing to point out with the overt and the covert, I just thought about, is that the overt narcissism type of spirit are usually inhabited by, or inhabit rather, men, whereas the subtly callous spirit usually inhabits women. So women are generally more covert if they are narcissistic, and men are generally more overt if they're narcissistic. But I will say that the most dangerous type of man is going to be the covert narcissist who is subtly callous. That's the most dangerous type of person I've ever met. But with the borderline personality disorder, I named this the fiercely fragile spirit. Okay, this is emotional instability, fear of abandonment, impulsivity, intense mood swings, unstable relationships, and self destructive tendencies. Okay, this is most women nowadays, it seems like. Just generally speaking, this is most women. They're emotionally unstable. They all fear that the good man is going to leave them, which, the good man is likely going to leave them. They don't give a good man much of a choice to stay, or a reason to stay, rather, and they're highly impulsive. Okay, if you look at the statistics for the credit card debt in the United States, for example, 85% of the credit card debt, which is now capped at $1.3 trillion in credit card debt, roughly speaking, 85% of that is women. Okay, 85%. That means just about $1 trillion worth of the credit card debt that we currently have in the United States is from women. So, yeah, what men aren't doing too much better. And shout out to all the people, men and women, that are aiming to get their finances more into succinct understanding and order. But yeah, it's definitely more of a women issue when it comes to the impulsivity. Men can be impulsive, but not in certain ways. Men are more impulsive when it comes to lust. Women are more impulsive when it comes to opportunity and shiny things. So their intense mood swings, if you've ever been around a borderline personality disorder person, the mood swings are like whiplash, okay? And again, you'll recognize this type of spirit by their fiercely fragileness. They're really fierce and sassy, but then they're like super victim-y. they're all the power and all the victimhood at the same time. Now we have the histrionic. Okay, so I named this spirit the fickishly self-indulgent spirit. This is the most fickle of all of the types of personality demons that I've ever met and encountered. So these fickle, self-indulgent spirits, I've only really known for sure that I've met one, but I'm pretty confident I've met at least two. But I know for sure there was one. And there was excessive attention seeking, dramatic expression, and suggestibility. Okay, the innuendos on this person was insane. Okay, and I'll get more into that. But the behavior, as far as the recognizable behavior, using charm or dramatics to gain approval, and they're highly emotional and theatrical. Okay, so now let's go back to the innuendos and suggestibility. Okay, there was one time at the gym where I saw this histrionic, and I knew she was histrionic, and the way she spoke, everything is sexual. Everything was sexual. The guy that she was talking to, and she didn't really seem like she was promiscuous, mind you. Okay, histrionics, if you look into the actual studies on histrionics, they're usually only acting promiscuous. They're actually not usually fairly promiscuous when it comes to the actual person-to-person contact. They just like the attention that they get from being that way. They don't really care about actually engaging. Like these histrionics might be celibate for all intents and purposes. However, at least physically, but in their spirit, they're not celibate at all. Okay, they have immense suggestibility and innuendo. So, like, for example, this woman at the gym, she was talking to this guy who she's obviously leading on, and she was aiming to tell this man, like, oh, so I saw you're going longer on the treadmill or whatever. And he was like, oh yeah, I'm going longer. And she's like, no, you're going longer, right? You're going. And it was just like, what the? And she's saying this in the middle of everyone. Okay. And she doesn't care. She just wants the attention. Okay. And this was years ago, mind you. This was years ago. And this is a very subtle example, but she's very charming. Okay. And she's highly emotional. She was very loud. She was very expressive. She was very, all attention must be on me. Okay. And then she also thought that her relationships were way closer than they really were. So this is why I say that it's fickishly self-indulgent. They're only doing this for self-indulgence, and they're fickle about everything. They cannot commit. They're almost incapable of committing. And what exactly is the demon trying to do with this fickishly self-indulgent spirit? What is the demon trying to do? Well, they're trying to just take your energy. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about this in the features of the demons here. But then we have antisocial personality disorder. Okay, I call this the predatory aristocrat spirit. Now, some of the core traits and behaviors, I didn't really want to go too much into detail here, simply because I don't know enough about the antisocial personality disorder from my personal experience. However, I will say that I know enough to know that there's a predatory aristocratic spirit to them. They're very, I'm better than everybody else and I know it type of a thing. Okay, they just avoid people, generally speaking. But again, I didn't want to go too much into detail because I don't have as much information in regard to the antisocial personality. But the predatory aristocrat spirit, that is exactly what they're doing. They are predators who seek to exploit at the finest echelons of power. So, some common demonic features across cluster B personality disorders. Okay, emotional intensity and volatility. These demons need your energy. They are highly impulsive or uncalculated in their risky behaviors. Okay, there's a difference between taking a risk and there's a difference between just being uncalculated in everything. Okay, right now we're going through the Art of War class in the Regal Change Academy for Iron-Minded Wealth. And we're talking so much about calculation, like calculations. You have to be calculative in every aspect of your life and everything that you do. The simple answer is you just have to work more when it comes to generating more revenue, of course. But if you're always impulsive and you're not calculated, don't complain about why finances are leaving you. If money leaves you, you're the issue at the end of the day. But if you know how to make it back and you create it again, well, then you have some discipline to you. Now, I wanted to talk about this specifically in regard to all of these cluster B personality demons, is because they all have a difficulty maintaining stable relationships. Okay, remember, demons come to kill, steal, and destroy. So, like John 10:10 says, the thief cometh not, but for to steal and to kill and destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. So that's the devil. That's the thief, right? And so ultimately, they're going to have challenges with empathy and understanding others' perspectives. Think about all of these types of spirits, okay? They're all self-righteous. They're all vanity. They're all promoting sin to some degree. This is one of the reasons why I genuinely think that these cluster B personality types, and I've even thought about writing a book about this, honestly, specifically with these three, because again, I don't know as much about the antisocial personality disorder. Because you could, I mean, I could probably write a book. You could probably write a book. Anybody with this type of knowledge could probably write a book about these types of spirits and demons because yeah, they don't know how empathy works. That's why I think that they're possessed. Because if you are actually godly, empathy comes really natural for you. And understanding other people's perspectives, even if you don't agree with them, that'll come pretty naturally as well. Okay. So, this is again one of the other reasons why I think these personality disorders are demonic. But I hope that this was a useful and insightful video for everybody. This was definitely something different than what I usually do for this type of channel, but I think that it was informative for everybody and it was able to give you some insight on what exactly these demons are aiming to accomplish when it comes to taking your soul, because that's what they want. That's what they want to do. They want to take your soul. So I hope that you all stay blessed out there. Stay blessed. Peace be with you all. And until next time.